Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. It has been a hectic week in Washington as we've been watching all of these hearings. And the first hearing that we were watching, we had Pete Hegseth, who was out there. He was a champ going through all of this harassment. And then he had a bit of a champion of his own in Senator Markwayne Mullin from the great state of Oklahoma. And we have him here with us today. Senator, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
So I think that you said things that we were all thinking, and I just want to, and even things that people haven't actually said out loud. So I want to play one of the clips from the hearing that you talked about qualifications. And I think it is so key because we go through these elections every 2 years or every 6 years. And how much do you really know about somebody? But then these guys just get grilled in the public for 3 hours and sometimes a second time. So first I want to play this clip and then I want to get to your reaction to what people said to you afterward.
I'm just making a point because there's a lot about qualifications. And I think it's so hypocritical of senators, especially on the other side of the aisle, be talking about his qualifications, not going to lead the secretary or be the Secretary of Defense. And yet your qualifications aren't any better. You guys aren't any more qualified to be the senator than I'm qualified to be the senator, except we're lucky enough to be here.
I mean, such a good point that you said, but we're lucky enough to be here because it is an honor to serve in that role. And Senator, I'm so appreciative that you are here today with us to talk about this, but nobody really says that.
Yeah, well, it's frustrating to me. And I didn't go in there planning this, by the way. I went in there with a set of questions that was really to give Pete an opportunity to reset. Because we knew he was going to be attacked. We knew that they were going to go after his past. I didn't know they were going to try to set themselves up on this moral high ground, which is absolutely ridiculous, which I'm not saying I'm more moral than anybody else. I'm probably the least of them. Believe me, I've made my share of mistakes, and I'm just by grace of God that I'm able to be here. But the fact that they were setting themselves up changed my direction because when originally we were just going to, have some softball questions for him and allow Pete to really just breathe, get his heart rate back down, and be ready for the next attack. But when they were going after qualifications, I'm going, what are the qualifications? To be a senator, you got to live within your state, you got to be a certain age, and you got to be a citizen of the United States. To be the qualification of the SecDef, Secretary of Defense, all you have to have is to be a citizen of the United States. There's not even an age requirement for you to do that. And they know that. And so where were they headed with that? It just frustrated me that they were all about saying that you're not qualified to do it. The President of the United States, who the people of America overwhelmingly chose November 5th with a popular vote and the Electoral College, said he is qualified. That's really all that matters.
Well, and I think Pete was making the point that why do you need all of these people with massive, all these generals? We didn't have this many generals in World War II. We had 7 generals. He was trying to make that point. But also to your point, it's very arrogant to come out and say this when you have Secretary Austin, who just botched the Afghanistan withdrawal. So all of the qualifications that he had didn't get us anywhere. We ended up with 13 service members dead.
And Pete did make a good point because he said, we have 44 4-star generals right now. At the end of World War II, we had 7 4-star generals. We have so much bureaucracy inside the DOD, we can't even fight wars now. And if you start thinking about he doesn't fit the mold of the traditional SecDefs out there, we have been trying to fit that mold for a long time, and it hasn't been effective. Instead of the Defense Department being more efficient and focusing more on the warfighters, we've created more bureaucracy, and we can't even pass an audit. There's such a sinking black hole there that they don't even know where things went, and they deny that they even left stuff over in Afghanistan. And they knew that disastrous withdrawal was going to end in that manner. We'd literally hand over Afghanistan to the Taliban, and we're saying that Secretary Austin somehow is qualified because he was a general. That mold hasn't worked. And the definition of insanity is what? Doing the same thing, expecting different results. We need something different. And Pete fits that mold. And the American people, by the way, said they wanted something different. That's why they put President Trump in office.
Exactly. I mean, that's what the American people have been saying this for a long time. That's why there was such a gathering around the Tulsi Gabbards of the world, the RFKs of the world. When Donald Trump said, we're going to all come together, they said, this is what we want to see. Something unusual, something that is not the standard party line, all coming together and saying, this is what we're going to do. I think it's going to be interesting as we go into 26 also to see what happens on a state level because of what we've seen at the federal level. But I want to go back to the stuff about Secretary Austin and where the military complex really stands today, the Pentagon, all of this whole situation where it really seems financially completely out of control. Interestingly, Secretary Austin served on the board of Raytheon. It's a very strange situation because you have somebody who clearly doesn't understand fiscal responsibility. Serving on a board is not like being the CEO of a corporation, but they were starting to question some of Pete's experience and his being on a board before this. And so this is what you had to say. I want to play this clip too, because this is what you had to say about that.
Questions that the senator from Massachusetts brought up about serving on a board inside the military industry, and yet your own secretary that you all voted for, Secretary Austin, we had to vote on a waiver because he stepped off the board of Raytheon. But I guess that's okay because that's a Democrat Secretary of Defense.
I mean, this is not like serving on the board of an organization that takes care of veterans or something. This is serving on the board of an organization that benefits if we go to war.
That's right. It once again, calling out the hypocrisy of the Democrats throughout this was just the most eye-opening thing that I had ever seen. I mean, how all of a sudden changed that that it's okay for them to do it, but they don't trust us to do that. And yet it's not even the same thing because, I mean, Pete was very clear. He's never served on a board when it comes to those that are building the war machines for tomorrow's fights. He has never been employed by any of those industries either. And yet they're saying that he can't do that even 10 years after he leaves, but Secretary Austin is capable of doing that. And you start talking about Secretary Austin and underneath his leadership. Once again, Secretary Austin evidently was qualified, but they're saying that Pete isn't qualified. Secretary Austin, underneath his leadership, we've had huge morale issues. Obviously, we've had a failure in Afghanistan. We're not meeting any recruiting numbers at all. And the only reason why they say that we are meeting them is because they've lowered the standard. Not the standard to be into the Army. They've lowered the number of recruits that they are accepting now because they couldn't meet them. We were coming up short by thousands every single year that Secretary Austin was over the secretary being over as Secretary of Defense. And so it's ridiculous that they wouldn't want to go a different direction. And it's frustrating to all of us, including the American people that sit here and see it. And people want change. I mean, you saw the president come in, President Trump, that brought a coalition together that the Republican Party hasn't seen. We'll just start with the Native American vote. Do you realize that President Trump won 64% of the Native American vote? He's the first Republican to do that since Nixon. When you start talking about the labor vote, he won the labor vote overall by 59% and at 60. I think it's 62% in the Teamsters. I may be heavier than that, but I'm going to say 62 because I don't want to overshoot it of the union inside the Teamsters. And so you start looking at what he's able to bring back, the coalition that he's able to bring back, knowing that he's working for the American people. You see him bringing in people like Bobby Kennedy, who has not been a Republican, but he saw that that the Democrat Party has left the American people, so he's really willing to make the change. You see Tulsi Gabbard, who is an extremely good friend of my wife and I's. I call her my sister, actually. She calls me her brother. You see what she is. She was the first one to expose the hypocrisy of the Democrat Party and left and became an independent. Now she's a Republican. President Trump was able to bring that whole coalition together, having Sean O'Brien speaking on his behalf. The first time the president of the Teamsters has ever done that, right? And then Bobby Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard out there on the campaign trail every single day. Now you're seeing CEOs and athletes and actors around the country that are coming out and supporting him. Why? Because the American people saw the failures of the Biden administration. They want change, and the Democrat Party has been tone deaf to this. And you see it through not just Pete's hearing. You saw it with Pam. You're going to see it. You even saw it with Rubio a little bit, unfortunately. And there's a lot of Democrats that are supporting Rubio. And unfortunately, you're going to see it with when Tulsi comes up and when Bobby comes up, when Kash Patel comes up. They're all going to do this same march because they don't realize that they're no longer truly representing the majority of the American people.
No, I think that you make such a great point when you talk about the hypocrisy. That's what we've been really highlighting for the past 4 years of President Biden being in office, the hypocrisy. And just what we saw with the military complex and how all the DEI and the craziness and like you talked about, the inability to actually recruit. But I just want to go back to the Secretary Austin thing for a moment, because I think people need to fully understand something you mentioned that I just thought, yeah, we really have to kind of explore that. It wasn't that he was taken from the military and said, okay, this is where you should go. You should be at the top. He was plucked from the war machine. He was already there. They're talking about, oh, Pete, you have to admit, or you have to commit to not doing this for 10 years after you're in office. But what about the guy who was already loyal to the war machine because he was getting paid by them, who gets plucked out of the war machine? And this is something that I think we see in politics way too much. I mean, even with pharmaceutical companies and all of the power of all of big food, big pharma, that they put money into candidates who get elected. And you make a great point. Hey, a lot of you aren't qualified to be here. But maybe they had really great ads because they had so much money behind them. And where did the money come from? I mean, there is a lot of hypocrisy that comes with what's happening in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and going back to Secretary Austin, you're absolutely correct by that. But going back to Secretary Austin, don't tell me you're not compromised. You were being paid a lot of money to be on a board. That means you don't have a work schedule. You don't even have an office. You are there just to give advice on how to penetrate the Pentagon and the Defense Department to get your product sold and get inside the front and get in front of the right person. That's the only reason why Secretary Austin was being paid to be on the board. And they may have met once a month. They may have met once a quarter. I don't know what Raytheon's requirements are to be on the board, but I know because, and I don't know if I'm actually able to say how much he's being paid, but we know how much he's being paid, which was a lot of money. And to say that all of a sudden now you're going to leave there and you're going to go and be the Secretary of Defense and think that you're not going to give them priority when they reach out and say, hey, can we talk to you about a problem? Can you show us a little bit of direction here of who we need to visit with? I would love to go back when he leaves office and find how many times people from Raytheon reached out to his office directly and how many meetings he took with him or helped set up meetings. I bet we'll be surprised. Of course, the Democrats probably don't want to expose that because that doesn't fit their narrative. But you're willing to turn a blind eye to him, and you're trying to play hypothetical questions with Pete.
And when I'm hearing things like this tiny little nut that I can buy at Home Depot for 39 cents, the Pentagon's paying $3.50 for each one, I have to question who is getting the kickback there? What is the relationship when you are coming from a company that builds parts and builds pieces and builds equipment to go to war? And we have not audited the Pentagon. We don't have a good audit where they can't pass an audit. We have a massive amount of spend. Nobody wants to dig into that spend. You make a great point. It's not okay that we've spent money we should not have spent. This is our money. It's the American people's money that was misused, and it should be looked at, because if you don't look at it, you don't expose it, it will happen again.
Yeah, there's stories about brooms, regular brooms that you can go buy at Walmart that the Pentagon was paying $400 a piece for. Right. And this isn't unusual. I mean, I was talking to a group of people yesterday that we talk about outfitting the warfighter, which is what Pete's biggest emphasis is, right? We don't win wars with generals. You win wars with the guys and gals on the battlefield. That's where the wars are won. Sometimes the generals hinder those that are trying to do the job out downrange, right? But I was talking to I kind of want to be careful on how I describe them, so I'm just going to say I was talking to some individuals, and their job is to outfit warfighters around the world. That's what they do. And so if you take the same equipment that we put on our guys that are going downrange versus what you put on some of our allies, and you can use any ally country you want because a lot of us are outfitted similar, the amount that we pay is 270% higher than our allies are paying for the exact same equipment. Now, tell me why, because we're buying the majority of it. In fact, we're probably helping buy some of it for our own allied countries. Why wouldn't we get the cheapest price? Why are we paying 270% higher to outfit the same soldier just because it's got an American flag on the shoulder?
Well, and Senator Warren, who's out there saying, will you commit to me that you're not going to go work someplace? Will she make that same commitment? Because I've seen a lot of people come out of government. They immediately start lobbying. They immediately start going to work for companies that benefit from their experience in government. And they make millions upon millions of dollars doing it. I mean, this is the ultimate hypocrisy. But I wanted to, before we go any further, I wanted to get to one of the last things you said on the floor, and what I think is so important, what you were in this hearing, what you were talking about, because here you have the party of Bill Clinton out there saying, you have a history, and we think you drink, and we think you've had these divorces, and we think that you're a bad guy because of that, which I think most people who know anything about Washington have seen in the last few years, that the behavior can get out of control. And I think, you've got a lot of people that are away from home. And I had somebody who said, run for Congress, run for Congress. And I said, it's just not, I don't want to leave Michigan. I want to be with my kids. And he said, you should really think about it. It's just like high school. And I said, don't ever say that. That's like a really
a selling point.
That's a really bad selling point. He's like, well, I meant from the standpoint of, you can find the people that go out all night, but if that's not you, you can find the Bible study. And I'm like, but we know there's a culture in Washington, and yet they're acting like they are holier than thou. So I want to play this clip of what you said about the drinking and divorces. And I think you really put them in a position where they didn't know what to say. So here it is.
The senator from Virginia starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their job? And don't tell me you haven't seen it, because I know you have. And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No. But it's for show. You guys make sure you make a big show and point out the hypocrisy because a man's made a mistake.
I mean, I watched that and I thought, my gosh, this is but there is a different standard for Republicans. And I think that is because we have been the moral side of the party or of the country. We have been the side of the country that has said, we try to be there. Certainly, as you've said multiple times, we're human. There are things that people fall down, they make mistakes. That should not define your life. That should not define your career. And we have given the other side grace. Certainly, we're not calling them out and saying, boy, you've made this mistake. It's got to permanently stay with you. You should wear a letter on the front of your sweater saying that you've done something terrible. But that's what they want to do. They want to humiliate someone instead of really get to whether or not he can do the job. They just want to humiliate him.
Well, this hearing wasn't about substance or about vision for the Department of Defense. It was, as you said, it was a character assassination attempt that they were trying to have on Pete, which, by the way, if you want to show someone's true color, put them underneath fire like that and see how they handle it. Pete handled it remarkably well. I mean, he didn't get rattled. He stayed calm. He stayed collective. He continued to answer their questions. He didn't deny that he had made a mistake. He constantly went back and said they're baseless allegations to what you're bringing up. But I have changed. I have made a difference. At one time, he said, I'm saved and changed because of two J's, Jesus and Jenny. And what my whole point on exposing them, because, if you notice, their behavior quickly changed right after that because they understood they lived in a glass house. But you should never hold yourself up higher, a higher standard than what you're willing to live. And I used to tell people all the time when I was running our companies daily, if I wanted my guys to show up at 7:30, then I needed to show up at 7. If I wanted my guys to show up and be clean shaven and in clean shirts and in clean pants, then I needed to show up with my clothes starched and freshly combed hair at 7 every single morning. If I want my guys to answer their phone after hours, then I need to be available 24/7, 365 days a year and always be responsive to them. I can't set a standard higher than I'm willing to live myself. And here they are, they're trying to set a standard that they don't even abide by in our own body. Now, why wouldn't the Senate hold themselves up to a higher standard themselves? And we don't. But what was frustrating to me about this is here, Jenny, I don't use the word Jenny because I always call her Jennifer, because when I say Jenny, I always think of Forrest Gump and I just can't get it out of my head. So you had Jennifer sitting behind Pete, and I'm sitting there. If my wife was in that same position and someone is going after and attacking my husband, who I know is flawed, but I know that has changed. He's not the man that they're accusing him to be, because we're all capable of changing. And I tell people I've never fired anybody for making a mistake. I fire you when you can't admit you make a mistake. Pete, it may have took him a little bit to start admitting he was making mistakes, but once he did, he fully changed. And once you realize that, you are a different man, and that's the man you want on your side, because that's called wisdom and growth. That's someone that you want. But if my wife is sitting there in the same spot that Jennifer was in, she would want somebody to defend her husband that she can't defend publicly right now. And so as I was watching her and her demeanor, which was very stoic, she didn't show any emotion. I felt like she's got to be the strongest woman in this room right now. I felt like I needed to just defend Pete for her sake and pull out the hypocrisy of it. And my wife, who doesn't comment a lot, after she actually watched the video, because at first she thought I did something really bad because her phone was bleeding or was blowing up. But once she watched it, she called me back and she said, "Thank you."
Oh.
Because I'd want the same thing to be done for me. And I said, Christy, that is what drove me to say it, because I've got to know Pete and I've got to know Jennifer over the last few weeks. And she has the same characteristics as my wife, that's willing to look past my faults and still love me because of it. And why I deserve that, I don't, but I accept it. But that was what got me probably upset the most, is just they were doing this in front of his wife.
But Senator, don't you think that a lot of this has to do with they're so angry at Donald Trump and Donald Trump bringing in people that aren't a part of their team? And by their team, I just mean the Washington, D.C. team. It's like, yes, he went and he abided by those rules more so in his first term, where he brought in people that were, they were more of the Washington type. And this time he just said, I'm going to bring in whoever I feel comfortable with. And I think that's, when I ran for office, people said, find the 10 people you trust the most. By the end of the campaign, you'll trust 5 of them. And you're lucky if you get 5, because
Right.
It is a cutthroat. I actually was watching Designated Survivor with my 11-year-old the other day, and you get in and you see it's exactly like everybody's kind of scheming behind his back, right? And she goes, "Is this what your job is like? Why would you want to live like this?" And I thought that's so funny, because that is what Washington is like. And they don't like the fact that Donald Trump is doing something different to change that. So the Tulsi Gabbards and the Pam Bondis and the Pete Hegseths of the world are now going to get the wrath that they want to put on Donald Trump, but they just have to they have to keep this narrative going that anybody who is not us is bad.
Yeah, I listen, I've met some really, really, really outstanding individuals I think that's been my biggest surprise is there's outstanding individuals inside politics. But unfortunately, the ones that get all the news are willing to, as I say, hurt you a lot to gain a little. They're willing to absolutely destroy you to have 30 seconds of fame, and can destroy everything in your life along the way, just as long as they're willing to get that moment on TV. And right now, what you're seeing with the Democrat Party, I don't even believe that they believe what they're saying. It's all for show. It's all just trying to get that soundbite. It's all just trying to get on news. It's all just trying to get in CNN or MSNBC to play their clip over and over again to show that, see, I'm fighting for you. Because what's happened in the Democrat Party right now is they realize there's no leadership left. There's no bench left. I mean, when their two top candidates was Joe Biden, who they had been covering for years because his cognitive behavior, and yet they still thought he was the best one to run against President Trump. But then they realized he can't even debate. And so their second was Kamala Harris, who came in, 20th in the primary, the only primary that she ran in. So, I mean, it's just, it's absolutely absurd that they even thought that she'd be the person. However, since there is no backup, there is no leadership, now you're seeing all these senators that are jockeying for 4 years from now.
And that's what we're seeing.
They're trying to fight because there's no bench left. They're trying to become the next inherent crown prince or crown princess to become the candidate for the Democrat Party. Remember, because the Democrats actually don't have open primaries anymore for the president of the United States. I mean, they haven't had that. I guess Obama, Clinton, that was an open primary in 2007, 2008. But after that, they haven't had an open primary. It was cooked beforehand. Hillary, it was cooked for Hillary. It was cooked for Biden. And it was cooked this time for Biden/Harris.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because I think obviously the sad situation that we've seen out of California, that has really, I mean, everybody's saying Newsom's done. How could he ever come back from this? The governors that rode on the bus during the campaign that were so corny with these weird, unprofessional videos. And I think you make a great point. We're seeing something different from that. And I think there was a lot of clownery, and the Democrat Party thought that that was the culture of the time, was to go out there, and the goofier you were, the more young people believed in you and you could get them on your side. That wiped out a lot of people for contending for 28 because they made such fools of themselves. So I think what you're describing is sort of having people that do have one foot in a trap. They know that they're injured and they're trying to make their mark, still feeling the pain of the trap from 2024.
Right. They're trying to separate themselves. You know, it's a telling sign that what they're trying to do isn't hitting the mark. When Caitlin on CNN had Elizabeth Warren on Tuesday night, I was on there before Elizabeth, and she pointed out that I don't think your questioning hit the mark. I think it backfired. It didn't go over the way that you guys were expecting it to go over. The American people, even if Democrats are even saying that, if even CNN is saying that you're going down the wrong track, that ought to tell you need to rethink your strategy moving forward. And don't think for a second that Elizabeth Warren is going to go work in any type of private sector. She's either going to stay in office until she has to be carried out, or she wants to go to the White House, God forbid. But she's a career politician.
Right. Well, I think what we're seeing is a Democrat Party that is trying to figure out what its identity is. They had gotten really
have an identity crisis.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out their gender right now.
There's so much we could have a whole show just on that.
But you know, I mean, I say that with the mindset of understanding that this has happened to Republicans too. There is a time when your party messaging can push a lot of people into a place that they think, well, I'm not comfortable, but this is what the people want, until they finally get smacked in the face and the people go, that's never what we wanted. But you can be cajoled into believing that that's where the country is. And I think that's what happened to them. And I don't make fun of them for it, because I think it can happen to the other side too. I've seen it happen to the other side. But that is why it's important that people in Washington spend time around the people in their state.
That's right. Well, the identity it can happen to any one of us. Anytime you think you're high and mighty, you're just about ready to be proven you're not. I always tell people, when things are going good in your company, you better start looking for change and looking for the hole in the tire, because things are going to go off rail pretty quick. But what I was referring to by identity crisis is this is the party that can't figure out how many genders there are.
Yes, right. I know.
The party that for 4 years couldn't answer the question of if you're a male or female, and couldn't and how many different pronouns did they come up with? And that's what I'm meaning by identity crisis. And the American people got fed up with that. And that's why they're having an identity crisis, because they started with the identity issue.
Another viral moment when Senator Sheehy said how many genders are.
Funny.
I know, because I'm a Sheehy. That was hilarious. Well, we are so grateful for what you guys do out there every day. And I know that you are one of the unique folks in Washington that also still manages life and career and business at home. So you take real life experience, and it's not just career politician for you. And we are grateful. I think we have to call that out when we see it. We're grateful because you are the person that is bringing that common sense to Washington every day, and it is much needed.
I stay humbled by my wife and kids.
Kids will do that to you, right?
Bring me down every single day. Yeah, come home and I realize I'm just a dad.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And your kids are never going to let you get a big head. That's the beauty of it. I'm putting on ball gowns for inauguration. I'm putting them on. And the girl's like, "Oh, your stomach looks huge." I'm like, Thank you. Thank you.
Today, right before the show, my daughter, who's 16, she's headed to a big she wrestles. My whole family wrestles. So my boys wrestle, 2 at Oklahoma State, 1 at University of Oklahoma, and my girls that are still in school, in high school, they all wrestle. And she's headed to a big duel today in Missouri. And I called her and I said, "Baby, how you feeling? How's your weight?" She says, I'm good. She said, "Oh, by the way, my biology teacher came to me today and just wanted me to tell you that you did really good. She was proud of you." And I said, "You didn't watch the video, did you?" She says, "No." I said, "So you don't even know what she's talking about?" She says, "No." And I said, "Well, thank you, Larry. I appreciate that." She says, "Dad, you're old news to me."
That's good. See, those are the kind of family members you need.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Well, we love that you are so close to your family, and those are the things that matter when you go to Washington. So, Senator Mullin, thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. For this episode and others, go to iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time. Have a blessed day.